Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into something uh, pretty foundational, I guess you could say, constitutions.
Ooh.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at how these documents shape societies and taking a closer look at a fascinating example, the Indian Constitution.
Sounds good.
It's a kind of like, I guess you could say, the rule book of a country, setting the stage for how everything functions.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's a really good way to put it. And it's not just about the rules.
Okay.
It's about values.
Okay.
A constitution outlines a nation's core principles, the aspirations that define its identity. You can think of it like a blueprint for a nation's journey, setting a course for generations to come.
Okay, so it's more than just a set of laws.
Yeah.
It's about defining a nation's DNA, so to speak.
Exactly.
But let's take a step back. Why do countries even need constitutions? Couldn't we just, figure it out as we go along?
That's a great question. Imagine you're making a big decision maybe about your career or a major life change. You probably wouldn't just jump in blindly, right?
Yeah.
You'd have certain guiding principles or values that would shape your choice. A constitution does something similar for a nation.
Okay.
It provides a framework for decision-making,
Right.
ensuring those decisions are aligned with a shared set of values.
So it's like a moral compass for an entire country.
Yeah, you could say that.
I like that.
Yeah.
But societies are messy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You've got diverse communities with different interests and values. How does the Constitution manage that complexity?
Yeah.
How do you even begin to create a document that reflects everyone's perspective?
It's a monumental task for sure.
Yeah.
One of the key aspects is ensuring fairness and balance, particularly in societies with diverse communities. A constitution needs to protect the rights of all citizens, preventing something called the tyranny of the majority.
Tyranny of the majority.
Yeah, where the interests of a larger group overshadow the rights of smaller groups. Think of it like a classroom where a few students always get their way just because they're in the majority.
Oh.
A well-crafted constitution helps prevent that kind of imbalance in society at large.
That makes sense. But it
Right.
can't just be about protecting individual rights, right? There needs to be some structure,
Right.
some way to organize how a country actually functions.
Absolutely. A constitution establishes the structure and powers of the government.
Okay.
It outlines the roles of different branches, how they interact, and the limits of their authority.
Right.
This prevents any one person or group from becoming too powerful. Like that story about Suresh, the class monitor who went a bit overboard with his newfound authority.
Yeah.
A constitution, in a way, tries to prevent similar scenarios, but on a national scale.
So it's like a system of checks and balances,
Yeah.
ensuring that power is distributed and no one gets to rule unchecked.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of separation of powers comes in.
Okay.
It divides governmental authority into three distinct branches.
Okay.
You have the legislature, which makes laws, the executive, which implements those laws,
Right.
and the judiciary, which interprets and applies them.
Okay.
And that ensures that no single branch can dominate, protecting against tyranny and abuse of power.
Okay, so we have a system where power is distributed and individual rights are protected. Sounds like a pretty solid foundation for a stable and just society.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to remember that a constitution isn't just about preventing bad things from happening.
Okay.
It also lays out a vision for a better future, outlining the kind of society its creators aspire to build.
So it's not just about rules and restrictions, but also about aspirations and ideals, shaping a nation's path towards progress and a better future.
Exactly. It sets the stage for a nation's collective journey, defining its values and guiding its evolution over time.
Now, before we move on, let's take a moment to recap what we've learned so far about constitutions.
Okay.
They serve as a nation's rule book, establishing a framework for governance,
Right.
defining its core values, and protecting the rights of its citizens.
They prevent the concentration of power through the separation of powers.
Yeah.
And they ensure that individual rights are not trampled upon by the majority.
So for our listeners out there, think about this. How do you see these principles playing out in your own lives?
Yeah.
How do you experience these concepts in your daily interactions within your communities and the larger society?
It's a fascinating question to ponder, and as we delve deeper into specific examples like the Indian Constitution, you'll start to see how these seemingly abstract ideas have a very real impact on people's lives. It's fascinating how constitutions, while they lay down this foundation,
Yeah.
they're not static.
Right.
They evolve over time,
Right.
reflecting the changing needs and aspirations of a society.
That's a great point. So it's not just about setting these rules in stone.
Yeah,
It's about creating a framework that can adapt and grow.
exactly.
But how does that actually happen? Who gets to decide how a constitution changes?
Well, that's where the amendment process comes in.
Okay.
It's a mechanism that allows for changes to be made to the Constitution. Ensuring that it remains relevant and effective over time. You can think of it like fine-tuning the rule book to keep the game fair and engaging.
Right.
It's a delicate process, often involving a complex set of procedures to ensure that any changes are made with careful consideration and broad consensus.
So it's not just a matter of someone deciding to change the rule on a whim.
Right.
There's a whole system in place to make sure that any amendments are carefully considered
Exactly.
and reflect the evolving needs of the society.
Yeah, and this highlights the dynamic nature of a living constitution. It's not just a relic of the past, but a document that continues to shape the present and future of a nation.
That makes sense. It's a reminder that even the most fundamental principles of governance
Yeah,
need to be revisited and adapted to meet the challenges of a changing world.
absolutely.
Now, speaking of specific constitutions, let's turn our attention to the Indian Constitution.
Okay.
What makes it so unique and intriguing?
The Indian Constitution is a truly remarkable document. It was drafted in the wake of India's independence, a time of immense hope and possibility,
Yeah.
but also immense challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Imagine the context that a newly independent nation, incredibly diverse
Wow.
in terms of language, religion, culture, and socioeconomic conditions.
Right.
The framers of the Constitution had this Herculean task
Yeah.
of creating a system of governance
Okay.
that could unite this diverse tapestry of people and guide them towards a shared future.
So unity amidst diversity was a major driving force behind its creation.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine the complexities involved in weaving together
Yeah.
so many different perspectives and aspirations into a single document.
It was a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
And the framers were acutely aware of this challenge. They understood that true unity couldn't be achieved by erasing differences,
Right.
but by recognizing and respecting them.
Okay.
They sought to create a system that could both embrace India's rich diversity and foster a sense of shared national identity.
That sounds like a very delicate balancing act. How did they translate this vision into the specific features of the Indian Constitution? What sets it apart from other constitutions around the world?
One of the most striking features of the Indian Constitution is its embrace of federalism.
Okay, federalism.
This refers to a system where governmental power is divided
Mm-hmm.
between a central government and various state governments.
So it's not just one central authority calling all the shots.
No.
Power is shared and distributed
Yeah.
across different levels of government.
Precisely. And this was a deliberate choice,
Okay.
reflecting the immense size and diversity of India.
Right.
The framers recognized that a centralized system wouldn't be effective in addressing the unique needs and challenges of different regions. They sought to empower states to govern themselves on matters of local importance,
Okay.
while also creating a strong central government to address issues of national significance.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between local autonomy and national unity.
Exactly.
But how does federalism actually play out in practice? What does it mean for people living in different parts of India?
Well, think of it this way. Under a federal system, different states in India can have their own laws and policies on a wide range of issues like education, healthcare, and even cultural practices.
Oh, wow.
This allows for a more nuanced and responsive approach to governance,
Okay.
recognizing that what works well in one part of the country might not be suitable for another.
So it's about tailoring solutions to specific contexts,
Yeah.
acknowledging that a one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't work
Right.
in a country as diverse as India.
Exactly. And this can have a profound impact on people's lives.
Okay.
For instance, a state with a large tribal population might have specific laws and policies to protect their land rights and cultural heritage, while a state with a focus on industrial development might have different regulations regarding labor and environmental protection.
So it's not just an abstract concept. It has real-world implications
Yeah,
for how people experience governance and how their rights are protected.
absolutely. And it also creates a system of checks and balances, preventing the concentration of power in one central authority.
That's interesting. So federalism not only allows for more localized governance,
Right.
but also safeguards against potential abuses of power.
Exactly.
But it can't be the only defining feature of the Indian Constitution, right? What else sets it apart?
Another key feature is its adoption of a parliamentary form of government.
Oh, yeah.
This means that the government is formed by elected representatives who are accountable to the people.
So it's a system where citizens have a direct role in choosing their leaders through elections.
Precisely, the Indian Constitution guarantees universal adult suffrage, meaning every adult citizen has the right to vote regardless of their background or social standing. The framers believed that this was essential for promoting democratic values and ensuring that the government remained accountable to the people.
That's a powerful statement about equality and inclusivity, especially given India's history of social hierarchies and power imbalances.
It is.
But how does this parliamentary system actually work in practice?
Well, in a parliamentary system, the political party or coalition of parties that wins the majority of seats in the parliament forms the government.
Okay.
The leader of that party or coalition becomes the prime minister, who then appoints a cabinet of ministers to head different departments of the government.
So it's a system where the executive branch of government, led by the prime minister and the cabinet, derives its legitimacy and power from the legislature, which is elected by the people.
Exactly. And this creates a close link between the people and their government, as the government is directly accountable to the parliament, which in turn is accountable to the people through elections.
That makes sense. It's a system designed to ensure that the government reflects the will of the people and remains responsive to their needs and aspirations.
Absolutely.
But what about the other branches of government? How does the Indian Constitution ensure a balance of power between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary?
That's where the principle of separation of powers comes in. We touched upon this earlier, but it's worth reiterating its importance in the Indian context. The Indian Constitution very clearly delineates the powers and responsibilities of each branch of government, ensuring that no single branch becomes too powerful.
So it's like having these three killers of government.
Yeah, you could say that.
Each with its own distinct role to play, but working together to maintain a stable and balanced system.
Precisely. The legislature is responsible for making laws, the executive for implementing them, and the judiciary for interpreting and applying them. Each branch acts as a check on the others, preventing any one branch from overstepping its boundaries or abusing its power.
So it's not just about dividing power, it's about creating a system of interdependence, where each branch relies on the others to function effectively.
Exactly.
But how does this play out in real life? Can you give me an example of how the separation of powers has worked to protect the rights of Indian citizens?
Absolutely. There have been numerous instances where the judiciary has stepped in to check the actions of the executive or the legislature when they were deemed to violate the Constitution or infringe upon the rights of citizens. For example, in a landmark case a few years ago, the Supreme Court of India struck down a law that attempted to restrict freedom of speech on the internet, arguing that it violated the fundamental right to freedom of expression.
So the judiciary in this case acted as a guardian of the Constitution, ensuring that the other branches of government didn't overstep their boundaries and infringe upon the rights of citizens.
Exactly. And this is just one example of how the separation of powers works to safeguard the delicate balance of power in a democracy. It ensures that no one branch can act with impunity and that the rights and freedoms of citizens are protected from arbitrary actions by the state.
That's a powerful illustration of how these principles, which might seem abstract on paper, have very real and tangible consequences for people's lives.
Absolutely.
But before we move on, I want to pause here and make sure our listeners are following along.
Great idea. It's important to make these concepts relatable and engaging.
So for our listeners out there, think about this. Have you ever encountered a situation where you felt like a government action or policy was unfair or unjust? How did the system respond to your concerns? Did you feel like you had avenues for redress or recourse?
It's a thought-provoking question that encourages our listeners to connect these constitutional principles to their own lived experiences. And as we continue our deep dive into the Indian Constitution, we'll explore how its framers addressed these very questions and sought to create a system that upholds the rights and dignity of all citizens.
So we've talked about like the structure of the Indian government, and how the power is distributed. But what about the individual? Where do our rights and freedoms fit into all of this?
That's where one of the most crucial aspects of the Indian Constitution comes into play: fundamental rights.
Okay.
This section is often considered the heart and soul of the document, laying out a set of inalienable rights that every citizen is entitled to, regardless of their background or beliefs.
So it's like a shield,
Yeah,
protecting individuals from the potential overreach of the government,
exactly.
ensuring that, even in the pursuit of the greater good, the basic rights and freedoms of citizens are not trampled upon.
Precisely, those rights act as a safeguard against tyranny, ensuring that the government cannot infringe upon our basic freedoms without just cause.
Right.
They form the bedrock of a just and equitable society, guaranteeing individual dignity and autonomy.
That's a powerful concept. But the term fundamental rights sounds pretty broad. What kind of rights are we actually talking about here?
The Indian Constitution guarantees a wide range of fundamental rights, covering everything from basic freedoms like speech and expression to protections against exploitation and discrimination.
So it's not just about these abstract concepts. It's about ensuring a tangible sense of freedom and security in people's daily lives.
Absolutely. For instance, the right to equality ensures that all citizens are treated equally before the law.
Okay.
Prohibiting discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth.
Wow.
It aims to create a level playing field where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background.
That's like a fundamental principle of any democracy. But we've all seen instances where these ideals aren't always upheld in practice.
Right.
How does the Indian Constitution address these challenges?
The Constitution provides legal recourse for those whose rights are violated. The
Right.
right to constitutional remedies empowers citizens to approach the courts to enforce their fundamental rights.
So you can go to court
Yeah.
if your rights are violated.
Exactly. This means that if you believe your right to equality has been infringed upon, you have the legal right to challenge that injustice in a court of law.
So it's not just about stating these rights. It's about providing a mechanism to uphold them, ensuring they have real meaning and impact in people's lives.
Exactly, and this is a crucial aspect of a functioning democracy. It ensures that power is not concentrated solely in the hands of the government, but is balanced by the rights and freedoms of individual citizens.
Now, in addition to equality, what other freedoms are protected under the Indian Constitution?
Another key right is the right to freedom, which encompasses a range of freedoms essential for a vibrant and democratic society. This includes freedom of speech and expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of movement, and freedom to reside in any part of the country.
So we can speak our minds, criticize the government, gather peacefully, form groups, travel freely within the country, and choose where we want to live without fear of arbitrary restrictions.
Yes, these freedoms are considered crucial for individual autonomy and for the functioning of a healthy democracy. They allow for open dialogue, dissent, the free exchange of ideas, and peaceful assembly, all of which are essential for a society to progress and thrive.
But what about situations where these freedoms might clash with other interests, like national security or public order? Are there limitations to these rights?
That's a great question. While these freedoms are fundamental, they're not absolute. The Constitution allows for reasonable restrictions on these rights in certain circumstances, such as when they incite violence, hatred, or pose a threat to national security.
So it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
On one hand, we want to protect individual freedoms, but on the other hand, we also need to consider the broader well-being of society.
Exactly. The key is to strike a balance between individual liberties and the collective good, and the judiciary plays a crucial role in interpreting these rights and determining the limits of permissible restrictions.
It sounds like the courts have a huge responsibility
They do.
in upholding these rights and ensuring that they are not unjustly curtailed.
Absolutely. They act as guardians of the Constitution, protecting individual freedoms from encroachment by the state and ensuring that any restrictions imposed are justified and proportionate to the perceived threat.
Now, we talked about equality and freedom.
Yeah.
What about exploitation? How does the Indian Constitution address issues like forced labor or human trafficking?
That's where the right against exploitation comes in this, right? Prohibits practices like human trafficking, forced labor, and child labor.
Okay.
It recognizes the inherent dignity of every individual and seeks to protect the most vulnerable members of society from being exploited or taken advantage of.
This is so important, especially in a country as large and diverse as India, where social and economic inequalities persist.
Absolutely. These practices are often hidden from view and prey on those who lack the power or resources to protect themselves by explicitly prohibiting these forms of exploitation. The Constitution sends a clear message that such practices will not be tolerated and provides a legal framework for holding perpetrators accountable.
It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, has the right to live with dignity and freedom from exploitation.
Precisely. And this right is closely linked to other fundamental rights, such as the right to equality and the right to freedom. After all, true freedom is impossible when individuals are trapped in exploitative situations and denied their basic human dignity.
Now, earlier we touched upon the concept of secularism.
Yeah.
How does that translate into a specific right within the Indian Constitution?
That's the right to freedom of religion. It guarantees religious freedom to all citizens, allowing individuals to practice, profess, and propagate the religion of their choice without any interference from the state.
Hmm.
It also prohibits discrimination based on religion, ensuring equal treatment for people of all faiths, and even those who choose not to follow any religion.
So whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, or an atheist, the state will respect your right to choose your own beliefs and practices.
Exactly. The state cannot favor any one religion over another or impose any particular religious belief on its citizens. It's about fostering an environment of religious tolerance and harmony, where people of different faiths can coexist peacefully and practice their religions without fear of discrimination or persecution.
That's such a beautiful and important principle, especially in a world where religious conflicts and tensions are all too common.
It is.
It's about recognizing the inherent right of every individual to choose their own spiritual path and to live in harmony with others who may hold different beliefs.
Absolutely. And this principle of secularism is woven into the very fabric of the Indian Constitution, influencing not only the right to freedom of religion, but also other fundamental rights and principles like equality and non-discrimination.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today exploring this intricate and fascinating world of the Indian Constitution.
We have.
We delved into its structure, its key features, and the fundamental rights that it guarantees to every citizen.
It's been an enlightening journey, unpacking these principles and understanding how they shape the lives of over 1 billion people.
From federalism and the parliamentary system to the separation of powers and those all-important fundamental rights, we've seen how this document strives to create a just and equitable society, balancing individual freedoms with the collective good.
Yeah, it's a testament to the visionaries who crafted this remarkable document and their commitment to creating a nation that upholds the values of democracy, equality, and justice.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. The Indian Constitution is not just a document. It's a living, breathing entity that continues to shape the lives of every Indian citizen. It's up to each of us to understand our rights and responsibilities and to actively engage in the democratic process to ensure that this remarkable document and the values it embodies continue to guide India towards a brighter and more inclusive future. Until next time, keep diving deep.